I mean, Biden's health has so often been discussed for the last what year, 2 years, and yet, what do you make of this story? I mean, it still has the power to arrest. It's on the front of the Times this morning. What do you make of it?
Was clearly significant because the report is that Joe Biden is obviously suffering from cancer and an aggressive form of cancer. And I think the fact that since that announcement, you have seen Donald Trump come out and actually offer condolences to say that he wishes Joe Biden and his family the best. It does feel as though the political barbs, which are so often there, have been put aside, and lots of MAGA Republicans are now wishing Joe Biden the best, which I think gives you a sense of the severity potentially of Joe Biden's health, when we're normally, to your point, hearing all these barbs traded about Joe Biden's health and mental ability.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because one of the things that Donald Trump does very successfully, he likes to fight some things. He always wants to have an opponent. And when someone is got a serious illness, does that mean all bets are now off with Biden? He can't, in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, go back against Sleepy Joe, because that's in some ways how he defines himself. He defines himself against the previous administration, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, let's see obviously where this goes. I mean, ultimately, when we were hearing from the Biden camp about the state of Joe Biden's health, they said, it's an aggressive form. However, it's hormone sensitive. That means that could be effective management. I suspect if Joe Biden appears more healthy, Donald Trump will go back to trading barbs and going on the attack. But it will really depend in terms of where that goes. But one other interesting element is one of the really big stories in DC over the past couple of weeks has been Joe Biden's health, but not cancer. It's been about whether he was capable of being president near the end of his first term, and whether he should have been stopped from even going for the second term in the first place. Of course, eventually he pulled out after a disastrous debate. And there's a big book coming out. There's
Mm.
lots been trailed from this. And I suppose with this announcement on Joe Biden's health, is it going to be still the sense of an open season with Democrats
Yeah.
turning on Joe Biden, Republicans? I think that's probably a bit tricky now to go back to that when people are worried about how he's going to fare in the coming months.
It's an interesting point, that, because presumably people want to still have that conversation, don't they? They still want to, and I know this book is making huge amounts of news, which is whether Democrats derelict in their duty. Was Biden derelict in his duty? Did he cling on when he was clearly too unhealthy? So how healthy or otherwise he was is an important thing for the Democrats to wrangle with, and actually the country as a whole.
Yes, and lots of people feel as though they have held off too long in having that conversation, and that conversation should have started over a year ago. And you will hear certainly Republicans, but some Democrats privately saying there was a bit of a conspiracy of silence,
Mm.
not just by Biden's inner circle, but parts of the media, when it came to covering the state of the president's health. And now you have a plethora of these books coming out. The Jake Tapper CNN book, of course, the most recent, but there have been books previously to that. So everyone now wants to talk about it. I suspect the conversation will keep happening. It might just perhaps be a little less brutal towards Joe Biden, because people will be taking into account the fact of this diagnosis.
I mean, maybe it's slightly premature to consider a legacy of someone who, let's hope will be treated and has a future. But when someone gets a serious cancer diagnosis and has stepped down as president, it does, I'm sure, in DC and in America, this question of how good a president Biden was, how responsible a figure he was, whether or not he ceded the past to Donald Trump. These are all very live issues about his legacy, aren't they? Where he fits in the pantheon of Democratic presidents.
Yes, and you can tell Joe Biden himself feels that because it's not just that these books are coming out. Over the past few weeks, we've also had something of almost a Joe Biden rehabilitation tour where he's been going out doing media. Obviously, the BBC interview, but also going on The View. And I think there was an effort by Joe Biden to try and write his legacy. And part of the legacy he wants to write is achievements in office, pointing
Mm.
out the economy was in good shape compared to other countries, though, of course, many voters did not feel that personally. And then also suggesting that if he hadn't been stopped from running, perhaps the Democrats would have won the election and things would look very different now. So that's the legacy he wants to put out there. But I think there are a lot of people who disagree and actually would prefer it if Joe Biden was rather silent at the moment, which through other circumstances may start to happen in the sense that he is going to be focusing on his health.
Yeah, really good point. Just before you go, Katie, just talk about the other news coming out of America, which will be happening tomorrow and later on today, I suppose is the best way of putting it. Later on today, Donald Trump says he's going to call Putin, then Zelensky. How much is Trump still trying to say he can do a deal with Ukraine? I mean, this shows he's not given up. I mean, there's a lot of talk 2 weeks ago and even a week ago he's ready to walk away. This shows, I suppose, he's still trying to do something.
He is, and of course, this is Donald Trump. He said that he would, sort Ukraine just in a day or two, and now we're well past the 100-day mark. I think there is a frustration in the White House that it has taken so long to do, that this is so complicated. I think initially a lot of that frustration was at Ukraine. The minerals deal between Ukraine and the US has been, I think, really helpful for bringing warmer relations in between Zelensky and Trump. We know that the US president loves any form of deal. And a lot of the frustration is now actually pointed towards Vladimir Putin and whether the Russians are going to come to the table and play ball. So Donald Trump does want a deal. It's just we've been here many times where it feels as though something's about to happen, and then of course there's just so many players in this, we're not quite sure where it is going to shake out. I think that at the moment there is a feeling that it is Putin who is holding things up more than Zelensky. And therefore, if this continues to be the case, if there is no breakthrough, you do wonder if the US are going to start to take more retaliatory measures against Russia, which is obviously a long way away from a few months ago when we were hearing about all the business deals and closer ties between America and Russia that could be coming up the track.
Having said that, the notion of Trump having his own call with Putin and then having to sell that call to Zelensky, there feels like there's an awful lot of room for misunderstanding and over promising and under delivery. I mean, it doesn't feel that that's a route to a very clear deal. Trump having two separate calls with two opposing people.
No, there, of course, you do need to speak to both sides if you are going to get something done.
True.
But I think if there is that big gap still, and you still have Putin saying that any peace deal with Ukraine should eliminate the causes that triggered this crisis, where is the landing space? And I think that the deal potentially, if there is one, is going to be one where there are quite a few uncomfortable things that the Ukrainians could have to soak up. And how does that land? And how do then European leaders who are very sympathetic to Ukraine respond to that? Do they get on side with the US deal?
Yeah, there's lots of wrangling still to come. Katy, great to speak to you as ever. Thanks so much for joining us.